Archetypes are the hidden architects of our lives. Ignoring them is like trying to build a house without a blueprint. Your best intentions may crumble without their guidance.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Stories Cafe podcast, the espresso version of Stories Cafe, a brief, enriching pause for reflection on literature, cinema, archetypes, philosophy, and the art of living deliberately. I'm Annette Wernblad, course creator, internationally published author, and wanderer at heart. So cozy up and let's once again step into the world of stories and the deep ways in which they can shape the lives we live.
If we are all completely honest with ourselves, the world has been through so many changes, so many struggles, so much fear and upset in the last years. And I think we could all use a little bit of resilience. And part of what you can expect when you start unleashing those inner guides is a sense that you can handle those problems. That's really the main difference that this makes is, you can't change a lot of what's going on in the world. You actually have no control over. But you can, and I'm not saying that you should totally shift your mindset so you're only thinking positive thoughts. If you know me at all, you know that that's not what I'm about, but rather shift your attitude to your own ability to handle those things as they come along. So you may ask, what are archetypes? What does that really mean? What is an archetype? So the sort of scientific definition of what an archetype is it's a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, or image that's universally present in individual psyches. Let's take that one more time. So it's an unconscious idea or an unconscious pattern of thought or an unconscious image that has been inherited through generations into us simply because we are members of the human race. And that means that it's collective, but it's universally present in our individual psyches. And if you think that's a little bit confusing, just hold on, because I will give you a much easier to understand definition if you've never heard of archetypes before. It comes originally from Greek. The first half of the word means to begin, or the first original, and the second half of the words means type. So it means that it is the original type. That's what archetype, what the word actually means. So let's look at a different definition that may be more immediately useful. So this collectively inherited unconscious idea, where do we see that? You could define it this way as well. It is a recurring universal symbol or motif that occurs in literature or in painting, in all storytelling, in mythology, and actually also in our dreams. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who spent most of his life defining archetypes and examining where exactly do they appear, he looked a lot at the very wonderful thing that no matter where we're born or when we're born, the same universal symbols and motifs occur in our dreams. And I think that is fascinating. So this is a more immediate way of defining it, finding it, that if you look at stories and you have symbols that keep occurring or motifs that keep occurring, or if you have characters in those stories that somehow represent universal patterns in human nature, then they are archetypes, archetypal. Equally as important is what archetypes are not. And this is one of my pet peeves, and I will try to do this as briefly as possible, very often online. And you may have seen it on social media, or you may have seen it on the internet if you look up archetypes. There are 6 archetypes, or which archetype are you? You can take this quiz to figure out which archetype you are. The other day, I was I paid for a workshop that I was participating in, and I did remain quiet. It took a lot of self-control to do it. The person who was teaching was talking about archetypes. One of her clients that she'd been teaching about branding worked a lot with archetypes, and she developed this thing about archetypes. And then finally, one of the people in the class asked, "What is an archetype? What does that mean?" And she said, "I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think it's like a personality type." And I was like, I really wanted to scream, because archetypes are not personality types. And archetypes is not something you can do a quiz to figure out which archetype are you. So you do the quiz, and then the quiz will tell you that you are the wanderer, or you are the creator, or you are the caretaker, but it's complete and utter nonsense. And all it shows you, really, those quizzes and there are 6 archetypes. It's not true. It just shows you that these people have a very short, probably, education, whatever you want to call it, and they are not actually academically trained in what archetypes are. Why is that important? Because archetypes are so much more than a personality type, and archetypes are so much more than something you can just do a quiz and figure out which archetype are you. So what are archetypes not? You are not an archetype. You contain all the archetypes. You are not an archetype. And if you reduce yourself and amputate yourself to one archetype, you're doing yourself a gross disservice. You're just sort of locking yourself into, oh, I am the wanderer. It's like those personality quizzes. They're actually very sort of amputating if you think about it. So archetypes are not personality types. And a living person cannot be an archetype. Sometimes, if you ask, can you name an example of a creator? And that person says, well, Steve Jobs is a creator. No, Steve Jobs was a person, a living, breathing person. A living, breathing person cannot be an archetype. An archetype is an unconscious, universally inherited idea, as we looked at before, and we have all the archetypes inside of us, and that's where the real power lies. Why is it that we need to look at archetypes and constantly be aware of them? Archetypes are the hidden architects of our lives. Ignoring them is like trying to build a house without a blueprint. Your best intentions may crumble without their guidance. That if you don't know the archetypes, if you don't have contact with them, if they're not aligned, if you're not using them the way you could do, you're basically, when you're building your life, when you're building your dreams, you're basically building them without a blueprint.
Thank you so much for joining me. If this episode added value to your day, you're always welcome to return. You can follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so that each new episode lands directly in your podcast app. And if you feel like leaving a review, it helps others to find their way here too. If you'd like to go deeper, you're warmly welcome inside Stories Cafe. Just go to stories-cafe.com, where you'll find further reflections, conversations, and a growing library of ideas. I'm looking forward to welcoming you back next time.